Imagine a man so powerful that he controlled 90% of an entire industry, so wealthy that he became the world's first billionaire, and so controversial that his name is still whispered in conspiracy theories to this day. But behind the immense fortune of John D. Rockefeller lies a dark history of ruthless ambition, corporate greed, and ethical dilemmas that shaped modern capitalism. How did one man arise to such power, and what were the true costs of his success? John D. Rockefeller, a titan of industry, a pioneer of modern capitalism, and the embodiment of the American dream. His rise from humble beginnings to becoming the world's first billionaire is a story often celebrated for its brilliance and tenacity. But beneath the surface of his success lies a tale of exploitation, monopolistic control, and the immense power that wealth can wield. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on the darker side of the Rockefeller's empire, from his ruthless tactics in the oil industry to the controversies surrounding his philanthropy. We'll explore the complexities and contradictions of a man who not only shaped the course of history, but also left a legacy that still influences our world today. This is the dark history of Rockefeller, the world's first billionaire. John Davison Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York, into a family of modest means. The second of 6 children, John grew up in a household marked by contrasts. His mother, Elsa, was a devoutly religious woman who instilled in her children the values of thrift, hard work, and faith. In stark contrast, his father, William Rockefeller, known as Big Bill, was a flamboyant figure with no morals. Big Bill was a traveling salesman who peddled a variety of dubious products, including herbal remedies and snake oil. He was also known for his many absences from the family home, often leaving his wife and children to fend for themselves while he pursued business ventures and questionable legality. This environment, financial uncertainty, and moral ambiguity had a profound impact on young John. He learned early on the importance of money and the lengths to which one might go to secure it. Big Bill's shady dealings and frequent absences forced John to take on responsibilities far beyond his years. By the age of 12, he was already lending money to his neighbors at interest, a foreshadowing of the shrewd businessman he would become. At the age of 16, John moved with his family to Cleveland, Ohio, a burgeoning industry city that offered new opportunities. Cleveland was strategically located near the Pennsylvania oil fields, which were beginning to attract attention due to the discovery of oil in Titusville in 1859. This discovery marked the beginning of the American oil rush, and it would soon captivate Rockefeller's interest. John's first job in Cleveland as a bookkeeper for a small produce commission firm called Hewitt and Tuttle. The position paid $50 for the 3 months of work, and while it was modest by any standard, it provided Rockefeller with an invaluable experience. He quickly proved himself to be meticulous and dependable, traits that would serve him well throughout his career. More importantly, this job allowed him to observe the workings of the business world firsthand, fueling his ambition to achieve greater success. Rockefeller's interest in the oil industry was piqued when he saw the potential profits to be made in refining crude oil into kerosene, which was in high demand for lighting homes and streets. At the time, the oil industry was chaotic and speculative, with wild fluctuations in prices and fortunes. However, Rockefeller saw an opportunity where others saw chaos. He believed that by bringing order and efficiency to the industry, he could not only profit but dominate. In 1863, but at the age of 24, Rockefeller made his first significant move into the oil industry by investing in a small refinery near Cleveland. He partnered with Maurice B. Clark, a fellow businessman, and the two men established a firm called Andrews, Clark & Co. The refinery was modest, but Rockefeller's keen sense of business and relentless focus on efficiency soon made it one of the most successful in the area. By 1865, Rockefeller's ambition had outgrown his partnership with Clark. Believing that he could run the business more effectively on his own, he bought out Clark's share of the refinery for $72,000, a significant sum at the time. This bold move marked the beginning of Rockefeller's total control over his business ventures, a pattern that would define his career. In 1870, Rockefeller took a major step towards realizing his vision of dominating the oil industry. He co-founded the Standard Oil Company with his brother William, Henry Flagler, and a few other associates. With an initial capital of $1 million, Standard Oil quickly became one of the largest and most efficient refineries in the world. Rockefeller's strategy was to control every aspect of the oil business, from production to transportation to marketing. This approach was known as vertical integration, allowing him to minimize costs and maximize profits. The success of Standard Oil was driven by Rockefeller's relentless pursuit of efficiency and his ability to negotiate favorable deals with railroads for transporting his oil. He secured secret rebates from railroads, which allowed him to ship his oil at a lower cost than his competitors. This practice, though highly controversial, gave Standard Oil a significant competitive edge and enabled it to undercut its rivals. Rockefeller's rise to power was not without controversy. His methods were often ruthless, and he was not above using cutthroat tactics to eliminate competition. He would later describe his approach as survival of the fittest, a philosophy that justifies his actions in the highly competitive world of the oil industry. By the late 1870s, Rockefeller had succeeded his goal of creating a near monopoly in the oil industry. Standard Oil controlled nearly 90% of the oil refining capacity in the United States, and Rockefeller's influence extended far beyond the industry itself. His success would soon attract the attention of the public and the government, setting the stage for the legal battles and controversies that would define the next chapter of his life. John D. Rockefeller's ascent to power in the oil industry was marked by a business strategy that was as methodical as it was merciless. From the very beginning, Rockefeller's vision was not merely to participate in the oil business, but to dominate it entirely. He understood that controlling the industry would require a comprehensive approach, one that involved overseeing every aspect of the oil supply chain, from extraction to refining to distribution. In the late 19th century, the oil industry was in its infancy, characterized by wild speculation, fierce competition, and chaotic market conditions. Hundreds of small independent refineries competed for a share of the booming kerosene market. With little coordination or stability, prices fluctuated wildly, and the quality of products varied significantly. It was within this turbulent environment that Rockefeller saw an opportunity to impose order, and more importantly, to establish control. Rockefeller's strategy centered on two main objectives: efficiency and control. He believed that by streamlining operations and eliminating waste, he could drive down costs and outcompete his rivals. But efficiency alone was not enough. Rockefeller also sought to eliminate competition altogether. His ultimate goal was to create a monopoly where Standard Oil would be the only major player in the industry, dictating prices and controlling the market. To achieve this, Rockefeller employed a combination of aggressive pricing tactics, secretive deals, and strategic acquisitions. He began by focusing on refining the most critical and profitable segment of the oil business. By investing heavily in technology and infrastructure, Rockefeller was able to build some of the most advanced refineries in the world, capable of processing oil more efficiently and at a lower cost than his competitors. One of Rockefeller's most controversial and effective tactics was his use of railroad rebates. In the late 19th century, railroads were the primary means of transporting oil across the country, making them a crucial component of the oil industry's supply chain. Rockefeller understood the importance of securing favorable transportation rates, and he leveraged Standard Oil's growing market share to negotiate secret deals with railroad companies. These deals involved the railroads granting Standard Oil significant rebates, a form of discount, on the transportation of its oil. In some cases, these rebates were so substantial that Standard Oil paid less than half the rate charged to its competitors. But Rockefeller didn't stop there. He also secured drawbacks, a particularly insidious form of rebate where the railroads paid Standard Oil a percentage of the freight charges paid by its competitors. In essence, every time a rival shipped oil, Standard Oil profited. These secretive arrangements gave Standard Oil a massive competitive advantage. With lower transportation costs, Rockefeller could undercut his rivals on price, driving many of them out of business or forcing them to sell their operations to Standard Oil at a fraction of their value. The use of rebates and drawbacks was a masterstroke in Rockefeller's campaign to dominate the industry, but it was also a practice that would later draw significant public and legal scrutiny. Rockefeller's strategy extended beyond the railroads. He also engaged in predatory pricing, a tactic where Standard Oil would temporarily lower its prices to levels that his competitors couldn't match, often below the cost of production. While this led to short-term losses for Standard Oil, it was a calculated move designed to bankrupt smaller competitors. Once these companies were driven out of the market or absorbed into Standard Oil, Rockefeller would raise prices again, recouping his losses and solidifying his control over the market. This relentless pursuit of market dominance led to the rapid expansion of Standard Oil's empire. By the 1880s, Standard Oil had acquired or driven out most of its competitors, and Rockefeller's control over the oil industry was nearly absolute. He employed a web of interlocking trusts, a corporate structure that allowed him to manage multiple companies as a single entity, further consolidating its power. The concept of the trust became central to Rockefeller's strategy. In an era when direct ownership of multiple companies was legally complex and often restricted, trusts provided a means of circumventing these limitations. Under the trust structure, Rockefeller and his associates held the shares of multiple companies, effectively controlling them as a single organization. This allowed Standard Oil to operate with the efficiency of a monopoly while maintaining the appearance of a network of independent firms. Through the use of trust, Rockefeller was able to centralize decision-making and enforce strict operational standards across his empire. This not only maximized efficiency, but also stifled any potential competition within the industry. The trust model became so successful that it was emulated by other industrialists, leading to the rise of other powerful trusts in industries like steel, sugar, and tobacco. By the late 1880s, Standard Oil controlled approximately 90% of the oil refining capacity in the United States, and its influence extended into nearly every aspect of the industry. The company's dominance was so complete that it effectively dictated the terms of the oil market, setting prices, controlling supply, and determining the fate of entire regions and industries. The creation of the Standard Oil monopoly had profound implications, both positive and negative. On one hand, Rockefeller's efforts to standardize and streamline the oil industry led to significant advancements in technology, efficiency, and product quality. Standard Oil's kerosene became the benchmark for the industry, known for its reliability and safety, which helped to light homes and streets across America. However, the darker side of this monopoly was the stifling of competition and the concentration of power in the hands of a single corporation. Independent oil producers and refineries were either absorbed by Standard Oil or crushed under the weight of its predatory practices. This consolidation of power led to widespread resentment among those who saw Rockefeller not only as a visionary industrialist but as a ruthless robber baron who manipulated the market for his own gain. The public and the government began to take notice of the immense power that Standard Oil wielded, and calls for regulation and antitrust action grew louder. Rockefeller's success had come at a significant cost to the principles of free market competition and economic fairness. The seeds of backlash were being sown, setting the stage for the legal battles that would challenge the very foundation of Rockefeller's empire. The rise of Standard Oil under John D. Rockefeller's leadership had profound and lasting impacts, not only on the oil industry, but on the broader landscape of American society. As Standard Oil tightened its grip on the oil market, the consequences of its monopoly reverberated across the nation, influencing everything from the economy to politics and even shaping the very fabric of American life. At the heart of the controversy surrounding Standard Oil was its unyielding control over the industry. By the late 19th century, Standard Oil had effectively eliminated most of its competitors through a combination of aggressive business tactics and strategic acquisitions. Smaller businesses found themselves unable to compete with Rockefeller's behemoth corporation. Those who resisted were often forced into bankruptcy, while others were absorbed into the growing Standard Oil empire. The absence of competition in the marketplace allowed Standard Oil to dictate prices and control supply with little regard for market forces. With no rivals to challenge its dominance, the company could raise prices at will, squeezing consumers and increasing its already vast profits. This stranglehold on the market led to widespread resentment among the public and among other businessmen, who saw Rockefeller's practices as anti-ethical to the principles of a free market economy. The impact of this monopolistic control extended beyond the oil industry. As Standard Oil grew in power, it began to exert influence over other industries that were dependent on oil, such as transportation and manufacturing. The company's reach was so extensive that it became a symbol of corporate overreach, and it became synonymous with the dangers of unchecked capitalism. The public's discontent with the Standard Oil and Rockefeller was strong. As news of the company's ruthless tactics spread, so did the outrage. Critics of Rockefeller accused him of being a robber baron, a term that became widely used during the Gilded Age to describe the powerful industrialists who were perceived as exploiting workers, manipulating markets, and amassing wealth at the expense of the public good. Political cartoons of the era depicted Rockefeller as an octopus with its tentacles wrapped around various industries, political institutions, and even the government itself. These images captured the public's fear that Rockefeller's influence had grown too vast and that his power was corrupting the very foundations of American democracy. This is kind of interesting because it reminds me now of these big tech companies that are so one-sided and suppressing certain news stories and only really supporting one political party. One particularly famous cartoon published in Puck magazine showed Rockefeller as an octopus with its tentacles reaching out to strangle the Capitol, the White House, and other symbols of the American government, underscoring the belief that Standard Oil's power extended far beyond the oil fields, which doesn't surprise me, and the robber baron image stuck, and it played a significant role in shaping public perception of Rockefeller and his business practices. For many, Rockefeller represented the darker side of American capitalism, the side that prioritized profit over people and power over principle. And I feel like things haven't changed very much. I mean, think about Amazon and all these other companies. This image was reinforced by the growing economic inequality of the time, as the wealth generated by Standard Oil and other monopolies concentrated in the hands of a few, while many workers and small business owners struggled to make ends meet. While the public outcry against Standard Oil focused on the ethical implications, the economic impact of Rockefeller's monopoly was equally significant. The consolidation of power within the oil industry led to increased efficiency in production, distribution, which in turn contributed to the rapid industrialization of the United States. Standard Oil's ability to control supply and stabilize prices at least temporarily allowed for greater predictability in the market, which benefited other industries that relied on oil. The wealth generated by Standard Oil did not trickle down to the workers who labored in the oil fields and refineries. While Rockefeller and his associates amassed vast fortunes, the men and women who powered the industry often endured harsh working conditions, low wages, and little job security. In many cases, workers toiled for long hours in dangerous environments, with few protections and little recourse if they were injured on the job. This exploitation was not unique to Standard Oil. but the scale of the company's operations and its influence over the industry made it a focal point for criticism. Labor unions and workers' rights advocates began to rally against the conditions in the oil industry, demanding better wages, safer working environments, and more equitable treatment. These demands were often met with resistance from Standard Oil and other large corporations, leading to strikes, protests, and in some cases, violent confrontations. The economic inequality exasperated by Standard Oil's monopoly also had broader social implications. As the rich grew richer, the divide between the wealthy elite and the working poor became increasingly pronounced. This growing disparity fueled social tensions and contributed to the rise of populist movements that sought to challenge the power of the monopolies and advocate for greater economic justice. The impact of Standard Oil's monopoly extended far beyond the era of Rockefeller's leadership. The company's practices and the public backlash they inspired played a significant role in the shaping of the regulatory landscape of the United States. The public outcry against monopolies and the demand for greater economic fairness eventually led to the passage of antitrust laws, including the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which sought to curb the power of large corporations and promote competition in the marketplace. However, the legacy of Standard Oil is not simply one of economic domination and public resentment. The wealth generated by the company fueled the growth of cities, the expansion of infrastructure, and the rise of new technologies. Demand for oil drove the development of pipelines, railroads, and refineries, which in turn contributed to the rapid industrialization of the United States. As the influence and power of Standard Oil grew, so did the public's concern about the dangers posed by such an enormous concentration of wealth and corporate power. By the late 19th century, Standard Oil had become the epitome of monopoly power, dominating the oil industry and wielding influence far beyond it. The company's practices, its secretive deals, its aggressive acquisitions, and its ability to dictate market conditions had made it the most powerful corporation in the United States and perhaps the world. However, this power did not go unchecked. Public outrage against Standard Oil's monopolistic practices began to mount, fueled by investigative journalism, political cartoons, and growing economic inequality. The voices calling for reform grew louder, and among them were those of journalists like Ida Tarbell, whose groundbreaking expose on Standard Oil in McClure's magazine revealed the company's ruthless business tactics to the public. Tarbell's work, published in 19 installments between 1902 and 1904, painted a damning portrait of Rockefeller and his empire, depicting the lengths to which the company went to crush his competition and manipulate the market. The growing public outcry against monopolies, particularly Standard Oil, reached the halls of government. In 1890, the U.S. Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, the first federal statute to eliminate cartels and monopolies. The act was named after Senator John Sherman of Ohio and was intended to promote fair competition and prevent any one company from gaining too much control over a particular industry. The Sherman Antitrust Act was a significant step forward in the regulation of large corporations. But in its earlier years, it was rarely enforced. Many businesses found ways to circumvent the law, and the act itself was vague in its language, leading to difficulties in its application. Moreover, powerful industrialists like Rockefeller had the resources to fight legal battles in court, often stalling enforcement action for years. It wasn't until the early 20th century, under the President Theodore Roosevelt, that the U.S. government began to take more aggressive action against monopolies. Roosevelt, known as the Trust Buster, believed that the unchecked power of corporations posed a threat to the democratic fabric of the nation. His administration initiated a series of antitrust lawsuits against major corporations, and Standard Oil was at the top of the list. The government's case against Standard Oil was built on the argument that the company had engaged in illegal practices to establish and maintain its monopoly. The Department of Justice accused Standard Oil of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act by engaging in practices such as predatory pricing, exclusive contracts with railroads, and the acquisition of competing firms through coercive means. The government's goal was to dismantle the Standard Oil Trust and restore competition in the oil industry. In 1906, the U.S. government formally filed a lawsuit against Standard Oil, marking the beginning of one of the most significant legal battles in American history. The case was a complex one, involving detailed investigations to the company's business practices, extensive testimony from witnesses, and the presentation of thousands of documents as evidence. The trial took place over several years, and it captivated the nation. Newspapers covered the proceedings in detail, and public interest in the case was high. The courtroom became a battleground where the principles of free market capitalism were put to the test, with the government arguing that Standard Oil's practices were not only illegal, but also harmful to public interest. After years of legal wrangling, the case finally reached the U.S. Supreme Court in 1911. In a landmark decision, the court ruled that Standard Oil was indeed in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. The justices found that the company had used its market power to engage in anti-competitive practices that stifled competition and harmed consumers. The court's decision was a decisive blow against monopolies and set a precedent for future antitrust enforcement. As a result of the ruling, the Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil into 34 separate companies. These companies were divided geographically and by function, with some focusing on refining, others on transportation, and others on distribution. The breakup was intended to restore competition to the oil industry and prevent any one company from dominating the market as Standard Oil did. While the breakup of Standard Oil was hailed as a victory for antitrust efforts and a reaffirmation of the government's commitment to fair competition, it had an unintended consequence. John D. Rockefeller's wealth actually increased. Rockefeller held significant shares in all of the newly formed companies, and as these companies began to operate independently, many of them flourished. The value of Rockefeller's holdings soared, making him even wealthier than before. Among the 34 companies that emerged from the breakup of Standard Oil were several that would go on to become major players in the global oil industry. These included companies like Exxon, originally Standard Oil of New Jersey, Mobil, originally Standard Oil of New York, Chevron, originally Standard Oil of California, and BP, originally Anglo-American Oil. These companies, which are now some of the largest corporations in the world, trace their origins directly back to Standard Oil. Despite his ruthless business practices, Rockefeller sought to reshape his public interest through philanthropy. In his later years, he donated millions to various causes, establishing the Rockefeller Foundation, funding universities, and supporting public health initiatives. While all of his charities and donations and these efforts undoubtedly had positive impacts, they also served to further entrench Rockefeller's influence in society. People argue that his donations were a way to launder his reputation, deflecting attention from the darker aspects of his empire. The Rockefeller Foundation, for instance, has been accused of promoting eugenics and other controversial social policies in its earlier years. Moreover, Rockefeller's philanthropy also came with strings attached. His donations to universities and research institutions sometimes influenced the direction of their work, aligning it with his interests and values. This blending of charity and control raises questions about the true motivations behind his giving. I feel like that happens a lot. John D. Rockefeller passed away in 1937 at the age of 97, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape the world today. His descendants remain influential in business, politics, and philanthropy, with the Rockefeller name still carrying significant weight. The practices and strategies that Rockefeller pioneered have left a lasting impact on modern capitalism. The concept of vertical integration, where a company controls every aspect of production and distribution, has been emulated by many of today's largest corporations. The influence of wealth on politics, another hallmark of Rockefeller's era, is still evident in the power that large corporations wield over our governments and economies. The Rockefeller family, with its immense wealth and far-reaching influence, has long been a lightning rod for controversy and speculation. Over the decades, various conspiracy theories have emerged, painting the Rockefellers as key players in a shadowy global elite that allegedly seeks to control the world affairs. These theories have nonetheless captured the public imagination and reflect the deep-seated mistrust of those who wield extraordinary powers. One of the most persistent and widespread theories surrounding the Rockefellers is the belief that they are part of the global elite, an interconnected network of wealthy and powerful families who allegedly manipulate global economies and political systems to serve their own interests, which I 100% believe in. Central to the theory is the idea that the Rockefellers, along with other influential families like the Rothschilds, have a hand in shaping major world events through their involvement in institutions such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. Proponents of this theory often point to the Rockefellers family's significant financial contributions to the establishment of these institutions. For instance, the land for the United Nations headquarters in New York City was donated by John D. Rockefeller Jr., a gesture that has fueled speculation about the family's influence over the organization. Critics argue that Rockefeller's support for these global institutions is part of a broader agenda to create a one-world government, sometimes referred to as New World Order, which I do believe. The Bilderberg Group, an annual private conference attended by political leaders, industry magnates, and intellectuals from Europe and North America, is another focal point for conspiracy theories involving the Rockefellers. The group, which was co-founded by David Rockefeller in 1954, is often portrayed as a secretive cabal where global elites meet to plan the future of the world, away from public scrutiny. The group's closed-door meeting and the selective invitation list have only added to the aura of mystery and suspicion surrounding it, leading to accusations that the Rockefellers and their peers are orchestrating a hidden agenda that undermines national sovereignty and democratic governance. Another dimension of the conspiracy theory surrounding the Rockefellers is the belief that the family has played a pivotal role in manipulating global economies to maintain their wealth and influence. Some theories suggest that the Rockefellers have used their control over key industries, particularly banking and oil, to influence economic policies and steer the course of world events to benefit their interests, which I do believe. For example, some people argue that the Rockefeller family was behind the creation of the Federal Reserve System in the United States, which they claim was designed to centralize control over the nation's money supply in the hands of a few powerful banking families. Well, it is true that the Rockefellers were influential in American banking, particularly through their ties to Chase Manhattan Bank, now JP Morgan Chase. Nevertheless, the notion that they have a disproportionate influence over global financial systems persists, and is often cited as evidence for their alleged involvement in orchestrating economic crises, controlling oil prices, and even engineering wars to protect their business interests. The Rockefeller family also has been linked to controversial social policies, particularly in the realms of population control and eugenics. In the early 20th century, Rockefeller funded organizations supported research into eugenics, a movement that sought to improve genetic quality of the human population through selective breeding and sterilization. The Rockefeller Foundation, established in 1913, provided funding for eugenics programs both in the United States and abroad, including Nazi Germany, where eugenics ideas were later adopted as part of the regime's horrific racial policies. These associations with eugenics have cast a long shadow over the Rockefeller legacy, leading to allegations that the family has a vested interest in controlling global population growth as a part of a broader agenda of social engineering. Theories about the Rockefellers' involvement in population control often point to support for initiatives aimed at promoting family planning, reproductive health, and contraception, particularly in developing countries. John D. Rockefeller's life and legacy are complex, marked by both incredible achievements and significant controversies. As the world's first billionaire, he transformed the oil industry and set the stage for modern capitalism. Yet, his ruthless business practices business, his monopolies and control, and the ethical questions surrounding his philanthropy continue to spark debate. And thank you so much for watching. It was so interesting going a deep dive into the Rockefellers. Let me know if you want me to cover any other dirty money families. I really like doing these videos. And don't forget to check out some of my other dark history videos.